than the ones that he's being accused of now.
Can I just say one thing
Yeah.
about that? Because I think this highlights a difference between Adonis now and Adnan now, which is that Adnan's position as a public intellectual and a political person. I mean, I think the criticism that I heard most of Adonis was not that, you know, why can you say this now when you didn't say this then? But that the protest didn't come out of the mosque. And if he had just recognized the people who were protesting, and if he had just thrown his weight behind them, what a difference that would have made for them. And that it was a betrayal of young people who wanted the same things that he did that was the problem. And that's, you know, Adnan's ability to take that kind of position on current events, I think, is also something that sets him apart, the two of them.
Yeah. No, I think he's become to his, you know, in a way that sort of is really unfortunate, I think, because of the, I think, very serious and interesting, fascinating intellectual work that he did in the period that I really talk about for the most part in the book, that he has become a kind of provocateur and therefore actually much, much less interesting in the later period than the earlier one. And it's clear, and of course, I mean, whether they came out of the mosque, they often did come out of the mosque, but they came out of the mosque because these were the open spaces. I mean, these are places where they could come out of it, where they could actually demonstrate and gather. I mean, that isn't to say that they were sectarian or not. Anyway, yes.
Another question?
Comment rather than a question. Just trying to connect the story about Adonis that you just said with what you said earlier about Rashida Rani.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you can add into this how, of course, they've changed because of work and age and etc., but also how they're responding to the radical changes in the terrain. So it may be not the fact that Shia and Sunni originated, but that 1979 and 2011 are radically different situations, such that in 2011, what someone might understand of a movement coming out of the mosque being perfectly defined is very different from what they might have anticipated in 79. And what they'll be looking at in 79 to predict where it will go. Further in 2011, it's on the aftermath of the Arab Spring denouement in Egypt, which also must have been on their mind. And then similarly, I don't know the answer to this, but with Rashid and his frequent evocation of abstraction being an Islamic form, etc., I just wonder if he was saying that in the 60s or not. What was his relationship to this material in 60s and 70s, or whether this has, I don't know the answer, but every time I've read that quote in various places, because he's often quoted saying that, and it's highlighted in the places where his work is not circulating, I kind of wonder if that's something that's crafted on top now, especially in light of the ways that his and many other works are now circulating within a newly collecting, you know, Middle Eastern art context.
He has made that argument much more recently, like in the 2000s.
Yeah, I would only say that I think that there was, interestingly, in the 1970s for Adonis, and it speaks, I think, to your question about change historical circumstances. But you know, in the anthology that I talked about very briefly, which was the first of his kind of like deep dives into classical Arabic literature and thought, and this massive kind of editorial project that in the mid-1960s. In the 1970s, he wrote, as many people no doubt know, this 4-volume encyclopedia, basically, called Athabit al-Mutahawwil, the transformative, and the fixed and the transformative, or something like that, where he similarly was kind of like doing this archaeological dig into not just the poetic tradition, but the intellectual tradition very broadly construed, from philosophy to fiqh to science, and it's a really massive piece of work. But it's also very clear in those, and part of what he's trying to do is kind of like highlight and bring to the surface, you could say, again, like proto-modernist strands within the Arab intellectual traditions, as he was doing with the anthology, that's to say, we have these Abbasid poets from the 8th century. These are our proto-modernists. Let's pay attention to what they were doing. In the 70s work, it's much broader. It's not just poets. It's, as I say, kind of Sufis and scientists and so on. But it's also very clearly the Shia tradition that he's really interested in there. Shia theology and jurisprudence and cosmological speculation. I mean, he's very deeply invested in the Shia tradition as being one element, but kind of the central element of this mutahawwil tradition, this dynamic tradition within Arabic thought. So, and he says in 1979, when the revolution happened, that basically this revolution is confirming the analysis that I made during these books. That is to say, this is the dynamic revolutionary tradition within Arabic thought, and here's the evidence for it.
I have a question, and I apologize because it seems like there's a lot of art specialists here, and perhaps this is really naive, but you mentioned in your the introduction you read, there was a moment where you talked about how she squeezes straight from the tube and doesn't mix colors, but it looks to me as if there's many color variations happening. So is that she's squeezing directly from the tube and then mixing this on the canvases, or if you could just talk about how she gets these kind of subtle variations of color?
Her studio is full of paint tubes. I mean, there are, yeah, I mean, of course she has mixed colors, and she does sometimes, but a lot of the colors that you see really are, all of them, straight from the tube.
Is that seen as something like shameful by artists to use straight from the
I mean,
tube? Or
yes, except for what she does with it is so extraordinary that it's, you know, one of those things that, like, she can do it, but, you know, probably other people would fail miserably if they tried the same thing. And she also paints on, like, very, you know, go out to the store, buy pre-stretched canvas and keep a bunch of them stacked next to her desk and pick up one and do it and put it down, let it dry. So, and, you know, there is one of the interesting struggles, and we've talked a bit about this, with her. And this was definitely an interesting, like, line of inquiry in the proposal process of the book, and because the book is actually, I should mention, part of a series on contemporary painters. And so, I mean, I did have to answer the question, you know, how important is she art historically, and what is she doing that is, like, regenerating painting today? And it's not, I can't give any of the sort of traditional art historical answers of how she has innovated form, because really she's not, as a painter, in art historical terms, she's not especially innovative. She's not doing, you know, she's not, to use a sort of cliched example, she's not, you know, painting with an inkjet printer that has a program that you wrote that makes, you know, paint splatter in a specifically, you know, 2018, 2019 kind of way. I mean, she's not doing something totally radically new with tools at all. And she has these very traditional formats, and she's done the same thing over and over again. Yet, I think, cumulatively, in sequence, over and over again, they do something extraordinary. And I think, you know, you can't take her painting separate from her writing, because each bleeds into the other. And I mean, after you've looked at her paintings, if you go back and read her writing, you realize how painterly the language is. And one of the arguments that I tried to make in the book is that, in a way, her paintings are like Giorgio Morandi still lifes, in the sense of your desire to possess them, and what their possession might do to you. So, like, what it might do to you to have an Hotel Adnan painting on your wall, and to look at it and to think every day. And so, in that case, paint from a tube, fine. Apply it with a palette knife, fine. Doesn't want to wash brushes, no problem. It's what it does to you. That's what's really special.
Do curators, I have a question, do curators that you've spoken with, do they worry about, for the reasons that you've just been mentioning, featuring like one or two Hotel Adnan things in a collective show or a period show or something like that? Because it does seem that they gain so much from being seen in some sort of sequence or accumulation.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I will just add that an area that is really open for art historical research, and archival research is the leporellas that she made, which are these accordion folded artist books, which she started I mean, the story I understand is that she went into a Japanese art supply store in 1964 and saw these Japanese folded books, and that's when she began making them. There is a curator who has found one from 1961, so it seems that it was earlier than that. And one of the first ones she made was for Badashekar Sayed.
Yeah, that's right.
And she made, and these she would sort of laboriously write out Arabic poetry mixed with signs, symbols, paintings, watercolors, all kinds of things. And this really is, I think, a form of innovation. And this is a contribution to what we think of as writing and what we think of as painting. And the problem is that she gave them away. She made them for poets she liked, and she gave them to him. So there's very little archival I mean, there's no inventory of what she made. She didn't keep track. She had no regular gallery representation at the time. So these are just sort of like scattered in the world. And this great potential salvage mission for some, young scholar to go out and, try to locate them. And this could be, this could be the real art historical argument for her importance, I think. And again, within the sort of set terms of the discipline, which are always up for debate.
If I may, for just a moment, kind of, I guess, reformulate, because what a lot of what you're talking about is this burning question as you're reading it of the artist, the individual later in life that becomes recognized and validated. And it's like a wildfire, right? At least in kind of how I have intersected her work, but clearly as you see kind of it grow and the heat, and it just is all consuming now. And so it sounds as though part of what you're saying is that there was some sort of a tipping point with kind of the scale of everything she had produced that then kind of coalesced, dare I use the word again, into kind of an appreciation.
Yeah.
Any final questions, or shall we break for
Food and wine.
Okay, I think there's the answer. I wanted to thank both of you. There is wine provided by the Consulate of Lebanon, and the food is from Baba Day Restaurant. Thank you.
Artists working in modernism for dealing with the letter as a way of kind of being
Is this something you're working on?
I'm actually working on post your favorite art institution. But
Oh, wow.
yes.
I have not seen enough.
Especially interesting your work.
She said, like, yes, it's calligraphy, no, it's not. Yeah.
That's good. It's working with it.
I don't know enough about calligraphy as much either.
I see the start sheet You're like a reader or advisor.
Hey, how's it going, Bill?